like a Facebook Live thing on Ecamm last night. I guess everyone's doing that right now, cooped up at home.
We're recording, man. We're good.
All right, cool.
I got you.
So I will.
And
I can
shoot you those files. It's no problem.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm not yet the part used. By the way, I was thinking I've never put up video, but I was thinking maybe I would try it for the first time. Have you ever done it?
Yeah. Just what I've done insignificantly is I've I have a Patreon page that it sort of serves as like a fan club, and since the pandemic began, I've recorded a few of these. Right, I hadn't done it before, and vis-a-vis the situation, I've had the video. And I take the video and I give it to my patrons unedited. And my feeling is that my patrons are like sort of I like to think are my most fervent listeners or my biggest fans, and they'll find it interesting, sort of, I think they'll forgive my mistakes and not, out me for screwing something up and such. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I don't know if they want this, but they can have this if you want. I mean, if you're recording it anyway, I don't mind.
I'll pop it.
Cool.
Okay.
So format's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to talk and mention what the subjects are.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously we don't have to stick to those, but that was just to give a framework. But as you know, 30 minutes goes by very fast.
Yeah, run the show, and I'll just do my best.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
But just the one thing or a couple of things I like to do preliminarily for recording is, first of all, I assume I'm pronouncing your name right because I've heard you say it many times on the show, but it's Craig Shapiro.
100%.
Did I say it right? And how do you want me to refer to you? Like just in terms of your show or more generally?
No, you could say he's the host of the Under Review Tennis Podcast, the hottest show in the land.
Okay.
No. He's the host of the Under Review Tennis Podcast.
Okay. And he launched, was it a little over a year ago or something?
We're about, I'm 20 months.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
We're still in the infancy phase. We can say it in months.
I'm 69. I think my 68th episode dropped today, featuring Brian Koppelman, the showrunner of the hit show Billions and the writer of the film Rounders, the cult poker classic. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cool. My fiance loves Billions, so I'll listen to it with her. I've only seen a few of the episodes. Okay, cool. So I think the rest we can just talk live. Oh, and then, I mean, this is usually something I ask like a player, not another podcaster. But is there anything you don't want me to ask you about? Is there like any...
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. Cool. All right. So usually I just pause to give that break in audio to cut, and then do my little spiel at the start, and then we get going. Sound good?
Rock the mic, brother.
And I'm going to be watching the time, and we're starting a little after 3 minutes on my recording, 5:08. And I pretty much try to do it live, so I'll cut it up a little before 30.
And are you in Brooklyn?
I'm in Queens.
Okay, where at?
Let's do this. It's a natural thing for us to do while we're recording. So
go ahead.
That could be the first thing we do. All right. So I'm going to pause and start.
You got it.
Hello, and welcome back to 30 Love, the tennis podcast where we keep things to 30 minutes or less. I'm your host, Carl Bialik, and I'm joining you from my makeshift studio in Long Island City, Queens. I've recorded many episodes here, but usually by choice and not because I'm not going anywhere else. This is also the first time that I'm going to record video and maybe put it out there to the world, so I'm really trying to lock eyes right now with my guest. I'm really talking to the audience, so it's one of many cognitive dissonances right now. But let's get past that and talk tennis. Really excited to have a fellow tennis podcaster, but it's almost unfair to him to put him in the same category because this show, last 30 minutes, I take about 35 minutes to record it and 10 minutes to put it out there. He's got a real show. He edits it. He gets guests from all around the tennis world. It's got music. It's got structure. It's just that, I'm single A ball and you're playing in the majors, and I hope we get some baseball this year. Welcome to the show, Under Review Tennis Podcast host Craig Shapiro.
My man, first of all, thank you, Carl. But it's a pleasure to be on your show, and don't sell your show short. You have a great show, and as I said, I'm touched to be on it, and I'm glad that we get to do this.
I think this is the perfect time because as much as I love the tennis podcast ecosystem, which I think is one of the best things about the sport going right now, usually I feel like you can already hear those people talking about tennis on their show, and there's like tennis happening, so let's get people from tennis. But there isn't tennis happening, so let's talk tennis. Let's do a crossover show. I feel like the time is right.
Yeah, no doubt. My show is, as you know, is just a straight up interview show where I talk with people who I consider the most interesting people in the sport. And for me, sort of the beat doesn't stop. Like, I'm just trying to bank episodes, put out episodes, and just keep it popping. And to be honest, our numbers are on the uptick because of the dearth of tennis.
Sure.
And I take no pleasure in there being no tennis, and I take no pleasure in the situation, but I do think that the podcast game right now is, at least from my perspective, I never like sit down on the current events too long, and I kind of consider our shows kind of evergreen, where they can be listened to, anytime. So that's what I'm seeing, is that people are going back in time and listening to, Mats Wilander talking about being 17 years old without a driver's license, going from Italy to win the French Open and such. So, that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, I think part of what's happening now is people can't talk face-to-face in person with anyone but who they're quarantined with, unless they are workers who are going out there, and stay safe if you are. But if you're not, if they're talking to their friends, it's like this anyway. So suddenly you and me talking and them listening feels much more intimate than it usually does, because it's what they're doing anyway. They're having Zoom Seder's, which I did last night, and then they're having Zoom podcasts with Craig and Carl,
And I just got off the horn the same way with Yevgeny Kafelnikov in Moscow, and it was
late night there, huh?
He's an outstanding guy. I knew him in a very inside way in 1990. In 1997 and 1998, I was traveling on tour as a racket technician, and that's really the genesis of my inside. I kind of pride myself on having some inside connections, and I talked to Yevgeny the weekend that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame last July in Newport, Rhode Island, but it was rushed. So we were able to kind of get down to the nitty gritty just now, and it was just great, and the making lemonade out of lemons is sort of happening in tennis. You're seeing it all the time now. I mean, Stan Wawrinka and Benoit Paire have been, drinking Aperol spritzes and rocking the mic on Instagram Live, and a lot of players. Bethany Maddock has been doing stuff in conjunction with the ATP, which is also something that I think's been interesting. Was that they're crossing over and working together, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's so much. When we're living our lives as they were until a month ago, there are a lot of things that separate different kinds of interactions, including between men and women in tennis often, if they're not playing mixed doubles. But right now, they're all just idle professional tennis players with a whole lot more in common than they have different, and they all want to see the sport get going, and they're better together. So it's been really cool for them to figure that out. I've been wanting to see what that ends up leading to in terms of something like tennis. Like, I feel like something has, not now, but somewhere between now and the first Grand Slam that we see, there's going to be something in between. And it could be one player hitting serves alone on a court, and then someone on another court simulated hitting. I don't know what it is, but do you think there's some bridge where we'll at least, the NBA is doing like a backyard horse competition where they're in different courts, but it's on video and they can talk shit and all that. Is there anything that tennis can do while we're waiting for actual tennis to come back?
I don't know, man. I feel like that's out of my pay grade, but I know what tennis can do that would be incredible. And that's sort of, the dream date situation is they figure out a way to combine events. They figure out a way to work together. They figure out a way to conceivably fix the schedule, and they figure out a way to, co-promote the way they are now, where that it's just not so, at times acrimonious and whatnot. And what I wanted to share with you was, one of the big takeaways from this, tragic situation with all these events going away and such is the emergence of Andrea Gaudenzi as a, in Yiddish, I guess you'd say he's a mensch and he's a maca, right? He's a big maca. He seems like the real deal, hyper-educated guy who gave a press conference, a virtual press conference, I suppose, a day or two ago. And, he really had what I thought was an incredible feel for the sport's shortcomings and what can be done. And for me, if the ATP is in, competent, sharp leadership, moving in and out of this, into this and out of this, that's very encouraging to me.
Yeah, and one thing that can happen in a crisis, I don't think you ever can find something that's good, you could say is good about what's happening, but one thing that a crisis can force you to do, whether you're fighting it in a public health way or in an economic way like the sport is it clarifies things, it aligns people along the same mission. And if everyone from all these organizations doesn't have any events to run right now, they should be talking, they should be creative, they should be thinking big.
No, and the last thing, no doubt, and the last thing I wanted to share was if they can fix the pay structure in a way that gets 400 players paid well, that would be, or 1,000 players paid, whatever it is, right? If they can get
as many as they can,
if they could drop the money down the ladder in a way that is useful, and if they could. Kafelnikov was just talking about it. He's like, these 250 events are suffering because the big players won't play them. And there's more big picture things that should happen. And I hope for that. As far as virtual tennis and video tennis and any of that, I don't know, man. I'm dying for the day I don't see another player or ex-player or Hall of Famer or broadcaster volley another ball off a wall, man. That ain't I'm like dying not to see that ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's telling us what we're not seeing, and it's sad. But I feel like these players are creative. They'll come up with something that's entertaining. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's not until they're actually on the court for an event.
But, one of the most, sort of prominent writers the other day, Tumani Carriol, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, he sent out a tweet that said that he didn't, compared to other sports, tennis isn't really, quote, a nostalgic sport.
Yeah, and I was surprised he wrote that.
And, I disagree with it 3,000,000%.
I mean, Rod Laver is on every center court for a good reason.
Well, the problem is with what he said is that perception becomes reality. And it seems to me that it's like if you're the writer who doesn't think that people care about the nostalgia of the sport, then that becomes a reality because you don't write about it. And what I do on my show is as opposite of that as you could be. And whether it's with Sonia Kennan or with Belinda Bencic or with Charlie Passerelle, like the stories that that I like to learn about and tell are just that. They're nostalgic, and I think that there's an opportunity for people that, since you can't watch live tennis, to go back and and learn about some of these stories. I mean, the stories of how these guys win, or how these guys and women leave their countries and defect and win Wimbledon and change their lives. And, you know, Brian Teacher, his wife is Taylor Fritz's mother, and he was in Australia, and she asked for a divorce, and he wanted to go home, and he pulled out of the tournament. Then he got back in the tournament. Then he won the tournament. He won the Australian Open. He changed his life. It's like, come on, man. You just can't put a value tag on those stories. So I think that there's a place for. I think there's an opportunity to ingest the sport.
Yeah.
Without there being live tennis.
And I mean, it's just. The people who can tell those stories firsthand, because they were the stars of those stories, are alive and involved in the sport and talking on air, and clips of their great victories are being shown during the big tournaments. So now all the more so, because that's what we've got. But I think that's one of the great things about the sport, is you get that connection because they lived it. And the sport's totally different now, but it's the same rules, and it's the same places and everything.
Well, it's like, the Tennis Channel and I have had a long, at least for me, tumultuous relationship. But like, I see Andy Roddick, Lindsay Davenport, Nicholas Pereira, who, has an incredible story, and Paul Annacone, who, I mean, come on, man, he coached Sampras and Federer, and he got to, I think 16 in the world, and grew up in Puerto Rico and then in the Hamptons. Like, they're all there on camera. It's like, I don't think we need to discuss like who the best ever is. Like, the best ever to me is like one of the most almost sophomoric conversations you can have, because you can't really compare eras and generations, and the numbers do lie. The numbers aren't the same. So I don't ever
totally agree.
And I don't have I don't have that conversation on my show.
And so we won't do that. Although I will say, Tumani's been on this show, and I think he is nostalgic, and I think he must be using the word differently, because there was that watch party where everyone was watching the rebroadcast of Venus Serena Australian Open final, and he was ranking his favorite matches between them. Like, he knows and loves the history. But that brings me to my question. I don't want to ask you the greatest player of all time. I agree, it's sophomoric, but we're talking about reconnecting with the game's past while we don't have the game's present. What are your top matches that people might not have seen before that they should go seek out and watch right now?
Man,
give me as many as you want.
I'll be honest with you. I actually yesterday was on the phone for a long time with one of the only people who beat Pete Sampras on grass, a guy named Mark Kyle, who has had problems in his life, and he's a dear friend, but he almost liked being a pro athlete too much, and he played pro tennis, but he beat Pete at Queens. But he's a great guy to talk with, and I love him. And I was asking him, because I'm actually going to be doing an Instagram live with Goran on Thursday for Sergio Tacchini. Tacchini sponsors my show, and Goran's a longtime Tacchini sponsor. And he said, man, the greatest match there ever was Goran Rafter, the finals of Wimbledon when Goran won. And
the semi was pretty good too.
Well, the semi went 3 days, right, with Henman. But when Goran played Rafter, it was the Monday when, the way Mark described it was, he said, man, you could just line up and go to the match. It was like said it was like a soccer match. And I'm going to watch that. I think I might watch that from beginning to end.
Awesome.
Man,
I wonder how many baseline shots were hit in that match. Not too many.
Well, I watched the last 2 games of the match, just kind of in preparation to talk to Goran. I need to do more research. I'm not there yet, but first, my big takeaways were, when Goran beat, it was 9-7 in the 5th, by the way, for those who may not know that. It was 9-7. Spoiler alert, it was 9-7 in the 5th, but Goran's serve was so immense and intense that, it was, and he was so tight when he went to go serve out the match that honestly, like tears came into my eyes watching just these last two games. Like I literally was sort of not overcome with emotion, but like it's an emotional 15 minutes of total tennis insanity. That's one. I think was it Flavia Pinetta when she broke up that Serena match or something? Was it Flavia Pinetta? Sorry, Roberta Vinci.
But the Vinci Serena match was fantastic. Yeah.
Vinci Serena.
Yeah.
Just to see, I don't know if listen. I mean, there's so many great matches to see. I mean, I probably would go rewatch the Borg McEnroe tiebreaker, or at least watch the documentary that Carrillo did for HBO, the Borg McEnroe doc. I made two documentaries for the Tennis Channel, one on Andre and one on Pete, that are very, they're touching. They're interesting to see their careers, especially now with the big three's domination of the sport. I feel like Andre and Pete and guys like Miloslav Machir, and they've all gotten lost in the sauce, right? Because of this domination. So those two matches come to mind.
I'll throw in a plug for Blake Agassi quarterfinal at the U.S. Open in 2005.
Yep.
And Schiavone Stosur French Open final was just great tennis, and Schiavone is such a pleasure.
Last one. What about the Pete Andre 7-6, 6-7, 7-6, 7-6 at the Open? No breaks.
Yeah.
I would like to watch that just to see the level that I remember being at the match. And I just remember the level was insane. And the way Brad Gilbert described it, he always says that Pete was a real tough out for Andre at that time. Sorry.
No, that's cool. I'm just now that you reminded me of one more when you talk about level. I think the level of the Federer-Djokovic, or Djokovic-Federer, I should say, 2014 Wimbledon final was just out. That was the five-setter. I mean, last year's was good, but very up and down. But 2014, it was just great all the way through. All right, so you have let slip a little bit just how much work you do for your show, and who you get and everything else. Can you share a little bit about? I mean, everyone now is seeing how my sausage gets made, and it's frozen sausage heated in the microwave with great guests. Don't get me wrong, but we just connected on Skype. We never talked live. Well, we did once briefly when we met, but we're just like talking, and then I post it, and you're watching 15 minutes of Goran because you're going to talk to Goran, and you've got Kafelnikov on the phone from Moscow. How do you bring this all together, and how much? What does it take to do it?
Well, no, I mean, listen. First and foremost, when I grew up with a father that loved tennis, and we grew up in Rhode Island, and my dad sort of, I don't know, I think he was like he was progressive and forward thinking, and he saw what was going to be, and he was on tennis from the second. And my dad ran a trip from Rhode Island, a bus trip, every weekend, Labor Day weekend, to the U.S. Open. So I'm 48. I think I've probably been to at least like 30, probably more than 35 U.S. Opens. And I was at all those middle weekend matches. When I finished college, just a club player. I'm not a great player, but when I finished college, I got a job teaching tennis in New York. I answered an ad that came across a fax machine from this outfit on 51st Street that was customizing and stringing rackets for the pro players. The guy's name was Jay Schweid. He was a Queens kid. He was an adult, but he had figured out this, he sort of found a vacuum in the industry where the pro players' rackets, they needed help. They weren't the same. If you were a Prince player and you signed a deal with Head, you needed a Prince handle on the Head racket. And the long story short is Andre had a problem with his rackets, and this guy Jay fixed the problem. Jay got a deal done with Andre where someone would travel with him everywhere as a stringer. So in 1997, I answered this ad, I got the job, and probably inside of like 6 months, I started to travel with Andre, and he and I are about the same age. And at that moment, it was me, Andre, and Brad. And, in addition, in tennis, when you get to a certain level, the agents sort of put you on the program. So these guys had another 60 players that we customized and strung the rackets for. And that still exists. There's a few people who do it. They've actually been on my show. But the guy named Roman Prokus is like the Yoda of racket technicians. So anyway, vis-a-vis that, I learned. I met all the players, all the agents, all the coaches, tournament directors. And I somehow kept those relationships somewhat together. And I went into television. A friend of mine from college got me a job at HBO in part because they had Wimbledon. So I, basically stopped stringing rackets in Cincinnati in 1998 and was working on, Inside the NFL that year for HBO. And then the following year was their last year with Wimbledon. And I never quite found a great lane in live tennis. I did different things, over the years, but I hated being in the TV truck. And I would do stories about the players that would roll out on the USA Network before, Andy Roddick took the court. He had a new coach, Brad Gilbert, and stuff. But got some work from the Tennis Channel. And then about 20 months ago now, at the encouragement of one of my close friends, we started a podcast that, has scratched a lot of itches for me. So from the second we started, I interviewed Jeff Tarango, and, he told a story about, the way he says he elected to leave Wimbledon, right? he wasn't thrown out, but, he told that story. And then I called Brad Gilbert. I interviewed Brad Gilbert, and we started. And from the second that happened, we felt like we had a good show. And since then, I think we've had, maybe 10 world number ones and a lot of very interesting players. We've had the last 2 female Grand Slam winners on the show. And, we had Bianca Andreescu on right before the U.S. Open began. We had Sophia Kenin on. And it's been a thrill. For me, it's been a thrill. I love it.
Is it for you easier right now to get people because tennis is idle? Because one of my friends was like, "Hey, I bet Federer's not doing anything. I'm sure you could get him on it." But he was kind of kidding. But it did make me wonder, is now a great time to be hosting a show? I know it's a bad time for the world, but is it a better time to get your phone answered?
I don't know. The thing about me is, my feeling is right now, if you don't want to be on the show, I only want people.
You're not trying twice.
I only want people on that want to rock the mic. If you want to get on and talk tennis and kill an hour, we would be grateful, and I think you would enjoy it. And we've tried. I had dinner with Novak last U.S. Open, the day or two before he actually lost. Right, he started having that shoulder problem against Wawrinka, and that was the end of him. But we've been talking back and forth with Elena Capolaro from IMG to set it up, and somehow the buffers in between make you suffer. But I hope that people. The one thing that I think is. So I should answer your question. Yes, it's a great time to be. It's a great time to be doing this.
People are looking to talk.
I think that it's a great time to be doing this, man, and I hope that people appreciate the work that we do.
So you have a sponsor, like you said. Are you wearing their hat right now?
I am.
Yep.
Nice.
And
I have to tell you, this is the longest I've gone without getting my head shaved and my beard trimmed in a long time, boy. I get it done, good. So, well, thank you. But I'm starting to, like, freak out. So the hat was sort of part of, like, the way I feel. I feel a little disgusting. But, yeah, I pulled a rabbit.
And then you have a Patreon as well?
Sorry?
And a Patreon. I just wanted to say.
Yeah, the way I pulled a rabbit out of the hat, and Sergio Tacchini, which, you know, it's almost like such a thrill for me to have them as our sponsor. They, you know, it's like the closest I feel to ever being like a pro athlete, right? Like we have Tacchini on board, and you know, it's like really the coolest thing in the world. And you know, for someone like me, when we were little kids, we would like be like rummaging through the socks at TJ Maxx to try to find some Tacchini socks. Like you couldn't find the clothes, and for me, it's great. And then we do have I have a Patreon page that there are different tiers of cool things that you can basically buy. It's a membership, and then I'll also release interviews early. I'll give special interviews back behind the paywall. And like I'll put this video up there, for example, so our patrons, like the patrons, the people that love my show, can see that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think you got a great thing going, and I'm just excited to be able to talk to you about it and be connected to it this time. And I have plenty more we could talk about, but I'm going to stick to the 30 minutes and leave them wanting more. So let's do it again and continue. How does that sound?
And listen, stay safe. My mother is from Jackson Heights, Queens, so
they're hurting hard.
So listen, you know, I love Queens, New York, and that's where my grandparents live, and that's where my roots are. So, you know, we're thinking about everybody in New York for sure, and you know, just hold it down, and hopefully we'll be out of this thing sooner than later.
I can't wait for Queens to be known again for the Mets and the U.S. Open, and not for what's known for right now. So let's look forward to that. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back again soon with another episode of Dirty Love. All right. Cool.
Smooth. I'm gonna press stop on the recorder, and I'm gonna shoot it over to you. And if there's anything you need from me, let me know. And if any way I can help you, let me know.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna if I link to one thing that then links to everything else, is that your Twitter? Is it the Patreon? What's like the hub that'll go to everything else?
That's interesting. Let me think about that for a second. I think
I could do more than one link.
I think like underreviewtennis.com is where you should go.
Okay.
Is my sense. But have a look at it and tell me what you think.
Well, I was looking at it earlier today. I think that's perfect. Okay. That's where you need to go. Because that'll lead people to your